quiet curtain over the crooked cabins of the town, softening the broken fences and burying the stains of the street. Yet inside the Whitlock shack there was no peace, only the bitter rasp of a drunk man's voice cutting through the storm. Silas Whitlock staggered to the doorway, a bottle in his hand, his boots scraping the warped threshold. Behind him, the lantern swung and cast a crooked light, spilling over his daughter's pale face. Hazel May sat stiff on the bench by the fire, her hands clasped, her eyes lowered as though she could make herself invisible. 21 winters had passed over her slender shoulders, and she had learned to live quiet, to bend under shame like brittle grass in the wind. Her father's voice slurred, cracked, yet carried with startling sharpness into the storm. "She's blind, take her!" The words were flung into the night like stones, hitting harder than fists ever could. The neighbors, drawn by noise, opened their shutters a crack. Faces, half hidden in the glow of lamplight, leaned to listen. Judgments spread like wildfire through that frigid air. The sound of Silas's bitterness was their supper story now, something to carry to the mercantile in the morning. And there, standing bare-chested in the snow, was Elias Redhawk. The giant Apache, taller than the doorframe itself, his skin dark against the pallor of frost, stood silent. His breath steamed into the night, his eyes steady as stone. His long hair was wet with melting flakes, yet he neither shivered nor moved. He had not come for her. He had come for firewood, perhaps trade, but Silas's tongue had made it into something else. Hazel May felt the floor tilt beneath her, though she did not move. Shame gathered hot in her throat. To be offered like livestock, broken livestock at that. Her father's cruelty had no bottom. She did not speak, did not dare meet the gaze of the man outside, but she felt it burning through the storm. Silas laughed harshly, swaying on his feet. "She can't see a thing, can't cook worth a damn, not fit for a man. Take her off my hands, Redhawk. You want her? You can have her." The bottle slipped, shattering against the snow-packed step. The whiskey spread dark like blood in the white. A murmur rippled across the darkened windows of the neighbors' homes. A girl blind and unwanted. A father who would trade her away to an Apache. The town would feast on this tale. Hazel May's heart hammered. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the cracked floorboards. Yet something drew her gaze up, hesitant, trembling, and she met Elias's eyes. For the briefest moment the storm seemed to still. He looked at her, not as if she were broken, not as if she were shame. His gaze was not pity. It was recognition. He took a step closer, the snow crunching under his moccasins. Silas sneered, arms thrown wide as though victorious. "Take her. Worth nothing here. Blind as a bat." Elias lowered his head, leaning close enough that his voice could reach her, but not the gawking neighbors. His words, soft as falling snow, slipped into the crackling silence between them. "I know you can see." Hazel May's lips parted, though no sound came. Her chest tightened. He could not mean her eyes. Her vision was clear enough. No, he meant something else, something deeper, something she herself had long tried to hide. He spoke as though he saw past her silence, past her shame, into the marrow of her. Her father barked a laugh, hearing none of it. "See? She's no good even for answering. Like talking to a wall." He turned and lurched inside, leaving the doorway yawning open to the storm, the lantern's light spilling across the threshold. Elias straightened, his breath lifting in the cold. The neighbors watched with hungry eyes, waiting for violence, waiting for spectacle. Instead he stood motionless, his face unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned, his massive frame melting into the snowfall. His dark outline vanished into the white, leaving silence heavier than any shout. Hazel May sat frozen on the bench, her fingers digging into her palms. Shame burned through her body, but under it pulsed something else, an ember that had not stirred in years. Someone had seen her. Not as her father's burden, not as town gossip, but as herself. The whispers outside swelled, shutters slamming as the townfolk scurried back to their stoves. The story would spread before dawn. Her father would sleep off his rage. The bottle shards would freeze into the snow. Yet Hazel May would not forget the sound of that whisper, nor the way her chest had lifted when it touched her. The storm raged on, drumming against the crooked roof. Alone by the fire, Hazel May pressed her trembling hands to her eyes, feeling both the sting of tears and the strange, unsteady thrum of hope. For the first time in her life, she wondered if blindness was not in her, but in the way others refused to look. Beyond the cabin, the snow swallowed the figure of Elias Redhawk. Yet she felt him still, his words echoing, a thread binding her to the unknown. And in the silence after her father's shouts, that whisper grew louder in her soul, promising change she could neither name nor stop. When the wind shifted, carrying with it the faint sound of boots crunching far off, she lifted her head. A shadow moved in the distance, dark against the swirling white, and her breath caught. She did not know if it was him returning, or only her longing shaping the storm into a man. But she knew, deep in her chest, that nothing would be the same again. The days after the shouting were buried beneath snow, so deep it silenced the earth itself. Hazel May rose each morning to the hush of white outside her window, to the brittle stillness of a cabin that smelled of ash and whiskey. Her father had not spoken of that night. He drank as though the memory could be drowned in the bottom of a bottle. But the neighbors remembered. Their glances burned hotter than fire when she stepped outside. Their whispers clung to her coat like burrs. "Blind girl. Cast off. Apache's charity." She kept to herself, moving with careful steps, her breath fogging in the frozen air. The wind cut sharp, but the wound inside her was sharper. Yet, through that wound pulsed the whisper she could not forget. "I know you can see." It was 3 days later when the first knock came, not on the door, but on the silence itself. Hazel May opened the door and found no words waiting, only wood stacked neatly against the threshold. Split, straight, and higher than her waist. She pressed her hand to the timber, the chill seeping into her palm. Her father, sprawled in drunken sleep, had done no such labor. The truth pressed clear. Elias Redhawk had been there. The next morning, smoke curled richer from the chimney, and the cabin grew warm. Hazel May sat by the fire, her hands curled in her lap, listening to her father's snores. She wondered what debt might now hang over her, yet no man came to collect it. Only Morwood appeared the next evening, this time left in silence, with no footprints remaining in the storm. On the fourth day, she found a bundle of rabbit meat wrapped in hide. She touched it with trembling hands, shame and gratitude warring in her chest. To accept was to live, yet to accept was also to invite gossip. The neighbors already murmured. She had seen them in the mercantile, Ruthie and Calloway leaning close to another woman, whispering behind a glove, eyes darting toward her. "Blind girl being kept alive by an Apache," she heard half-hidden, enough to send blood rushing hot into her cheeks. Hazel May left quickly, but when she reached home, her father spat the same venom, louder, uglier. "Better watch yourself, girl. You'll be nothing but his squaw if you let him hang around." He swayed, eyes narrowed, voice heavy with both liquor and bitterness. She turned away, her throat burning. That night the snow fell again, erasing tracks, erasing shame for a moment. When she stepped out to bring in the wood, she found him there at last, Elias, standing half-shadowed by the trees. He said nothing, but his presence filled the clearing, a figure carved from silence and storm. She froze, hands clutching her shawl. His eyes met hers, steady, patient, as though waiting for her to choose. She wanted to speak, to ask why he came, but the words clung heavy on her tongue. He stepped forward, placed another log on the pile, and turned to leave. Her voice broke free, small and shaking. "Why?" Elias paused. Snow gathered on his shoulders, his breath clouded in the moonlight. He did not answer with words. Instead he bent, brushed snow from her porch step with his broad hand, then straightened and looked at her once more. The action, simple as it was, spoke more than any sentence. He was clearing a path, not for himself but for her. Her heart ached with a strange, sharp warmth. She whispered thank you, but the wind carried it away. The pattern grew. Days turned into weeks. He appeared like a shadow at dawn or dusk, mending the fence her father neglected, setting traps near the creek, leaving food by the door. Never asking, never demanding. His silence grew heavy, yet not threatening, rather steady, like a rock in the river that refused to move even as the water battered past. Hazel May began to wait for it, the quiet rhythm of his presence. She watched from the window sometimes, her breath fogging the glass as she traced his figure through the flurries. There was dignity in the way he worked, in the curve of his scarred back as he split logs, in the deliberate patience of his movements. He never hurried, never boasted. He simply did. And slowly, something in her began to stir. She found herself standing straighter when she stepped into town, though the whispers had grown sharper. Ruthie hissed in the mercantile. "She's already his, you can see it." Mrs. Hargrove clucked her tongue in church, muttering that shame breeds shame. Yet when Hazel May walked home, she held her head just high enough to see past their judgment. One evening, the storm broke and the sky cleared to a pale silver. Elias brought no wood, no food, only something small in his palm. He placed it on the porch rail before her, an object carved from cedar, delicate wings spread. A bird, no bigger than her thumb, its eyes etched with infinite care. Her throat tightened. She traced the tiny feathers with her finger, warmth spreading through her chest. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Elias's gaze lingered, then dropped to her feet, tracing the way she shifted her steps, careful, deliberate. His voice came at last low, almost hidden beneath the wind. "Snow makes us all blind, but I see your steps." The words struck deep. He had watched her, not as a burden, not as a broken girl, but as someone navigating the world with quiet courage. He had seen what no one else cared to. Her breath caught, and before fear could stop her, she reached out. Her hand found his, rough and scarred, warm against the cold. She did not hold long, only enough for her heart to leap with something she had never felt before. Her father's voice shattered it. From inside came the crash of a bottle, his shout filling the cabin. "Useless girl! Get back here!" Shame surged hot across her skin. She pulled away, clutching the bird close. Elias's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, only turned back toward the trees. Hazel May stood on the porch, the carved bird pressed against her chest. The storm clouds were returning, rolling low across the horizon, and the cold deepened. Yet inside her, beneath the sting of her father's words, the ember glowed stronger. She could not deny it now. She was no longer invisible. As Elias disappeared into the snow, her father's voice rose again in drunken rage, and the neighbors' windows flickered with lamplight, ready to carry fresh gossip. But Hazel May's hand trembled not from fear, but from the weight of something new. For in the hush of the falling snow, she could still hear his whisper, echoing through her bones. "I see your steps." And when the wind shifted, carrying the faint crackle of torches from the town, she lifted her head, realizing the storm was not only in the sky, it was coming for her. The winter deepened, and with it the tongues of the town grew sharper. Hazel May felt their weight each time she stepped beyond the cabin. The mercantile, once a place of routine, now bristled with whispers that clung like frost to her skirts. Ruthie and Calloway's voice cut loudest, though feigned as a hush. "Blind girl kept alive by an Apache," she said, leaning over barrels of flour, her words drifting like smoke. Others nodded, not daring open defiance but savoring the taste of scandal. Hazel May bore it with bowed head, her basket held tight against her chest. She knew her father would never shield her. He slept off drink, his days a blur of curses and empty bottles. She walked alone, endured alone. Yet behind her solitude, she carried the memory of cedar wings in her pocket, the bird Elias had carved. It steadied her when the eyes grew too heavy, when Mrs. Hargrove muttered near the church doors, "Shame breeds shame." Marshall Boone stopped her once on the icy boardwalk, his voice low and weary. "Hazel May, you do best to keep distance from that man. Folks are stirring." His eyes were not cruel, but wary, as though her mere nearness to Elias was tinder for a fire he could not put out. She nodded, though her chest tightened. Boone's warning carried the truth she already felt. Judgment was building like a storm. Yet when she returned home, Elias was there again, quiet as snowfall, stacking wood along the side of the cabin. He did not look up at first, but she saw how careful his movements were, how deliberate. He was mending what her father had broken. She wanted to tell him of the gossip, the knives of words cutting her skin raw, but her throat closed around it. Instead, she watched in silence as his breath clouded in the air, as his strength bent the storm to his will. That night, the blizzard rose fierce,